Let's talk about Planet of Lana 2, because this is a rare kind of sequel that trades mechanical depth for emotional weight. It doesn't try to outdo the original mechanically, but instead it leans much more heavily into emotion and atmosphere. And while that doesn't always work from a gameplay perspective, what it does deliver is a beautifully crafted, quietly devastating experience that really sticks with you after the credits roll. Now, this is a very memorable game. It's got excellent environmental storytelling, a gorgeous art style, and one of the best soundtracks I've heard this year. Now, the puzzles aren't quite as strong as they were the first time around, but honestly, the narrative carries it through those weaker moments. Now, you don't need to have played the first game to understand what's going on here, but it definitely helps give more context to the characters and the world building. Because, like the original, this is a story that doesn't spell everything out for players. It trusts you to piece things together yourself. Without going too far into spoilers, the first game followed Lana and her companion Moi as they explored a world overtaken by hostile machines. Now, the sequel builds on that idea as we return to Lana and Moi's home, but things have changed. Our technology has started to spread across the tribes, bringing progress, but also both greed and imbalance. And as different groups begin using that technology in their own ways, tensions inevitably start to rise. Now, eventually that balance completely breaks down, and Lana and Moi are forced to leave their home behind and set out across multiple regions to try and fix something that goes horribly wrong. Now, I won't spoil anything beyond that, don't worry, but the story is full of really powerful emotional moments. A lot of it is told visually rather than through dialogue, although the game does feature its own set of language and linguistic cues, and that approach actually works incredibly well. In a way, this game actually reminded me a lot of the opening act of Wall-E, where you're expected to read between the lines and pick up on details in the environment. Now, you'll notice things like scattered posters, background set pieces, or subtle changes in the world that hint at a deeper history. It's all very understated, but it's also incredibly effective too. Now, the ending is also worth mentioning because it goes for a more open, cliffhanger style conclusion. That won't work for everyone, but it does feel very intentional. It reinforces the idea that this world, and its problems, aren't fully resolved yet. And honestly, it left me hoping we'll get a third game at some point. Now, visually, the game is absolutely stunning. It keeps the same art style and colour palette from the first game, but expands on it in meaningful ways. Each chapter has its own tone, and chapter 3 in particular stands out as one of the strongest, taking you across multiple different biomes. The game does a great job of constantly shifting its environments just when you think you've seen everything. At times it genuinely feels like a Simon Stålenhag art book brought to life. Now, structurally, the first half of the game follows a fairly familiar pattern. You're sent out to collect key items, and then as you progress, the deeper narrative threads start to unfold. It's very much a cinematic puzzle platformer, because the story is front and centre above everything else. And while that does work for immersion, it also means the gameplay systems aren't quite as deep as they could be. Now, the platforming itself is fine, and I mean, the game isn't trying to be a precision platformer, it's more designed to get you from point A to point B, creating a sense of wonder rather than challenge. The camera plays a big role in that too. It often pulls back to show off these huge sweeping environments, whether that be forests, scrapyards, or open landscapes. Visually, it works really well, and there are moments where you just stop and take it all in. But that focus on spectacle does come at a cost, because mechanically, the game never quite reaches the same level as other titles in the genre. Now, if you compare it to something like Symphonia, which I do appreciate is an indie precision platformer, but that game also blended audio-visual identity with challenging gameplay, and it did so in a really compelling manner. Planet of Lana 2, meanwhile, leans much more heavily on presentation rather than gameplay. Now, the puzzles are also fairly straightforward here, and most of them fall into the casual category, with only a handful toward the end requiring any real thought. Now, a lot of the gameplay revolves around switching between Lana and Moi. Lana handles things like switches, machinery and general traversal, while Moi is much more versatile. They're able to cut restraints, interact with other creatures, and disable electronics using an EMP style ability. Now, the systems work well together, but they don't evolve much over time. It's only really toward the end of the game that things start to get more demanding, where you're switching between characters much more quickly. And by that point, the difficulty curve hasn't really built up enough to make those moments feel all that challenging. Now, to be fair, there are some new ideas introduced along the way. In Chapter 3, for example, Moi can control fish that release toxic sludge to obscure vision and access areas you wouldn't normally be able to reach. There are also flying creatures later on that carry water, and these fluffy, cotton-like creatures that can set themselves on fire to burn obstacles. And yeah, that last one is a bit strange and certainly needs to be expanded on, because the game has a very clear theme around the dangers of technology and humanity's impact on nature. It's consistent throughout your adventure, and there's even a subplot involving a sacred deer that reinforces that message. So with that in mind, I'm not quite sure why the devs decided to include these cute fluffy creatures that you essentially sacrifice to progress. It feels a bit at odds with everything else, and while it's not a major issue, it is very noticeable. Now as the game progresses, the environment shifts from natural landscapes into darker, more industrial areas, and this works really well. The colours change along with it too, from warm, vibrant tones early on to colder blues, reds and even purples. It reinforces both the narrative and the atmosphere in a really effective way. But where the game excels is in its emotional core. As you move through each chapter, the bond between Lana and Moi inevitably grows stronger, and by the end you're completely invested in their journey, and there are a few moments here that genuinely land in a great way. Now a lot of that impact also comes from the soundtrack. Composed by Takeshi Furukawa, who also worked on The Last Guardian, the music here is fantastic. There's a recurring piano motif that really sticks with you, and it lingers across the score. Even after you finish the game, you'll probably find yourself humming it to yourself. And it's, I guess, no surprise that it's already inspired things outside the game itself, like Jodie Wisternoff's remix of Moi on Anjuna Deep 15. So overall, Planet of Lana isn't the best puzzle game of the year, and it's certainly not the strongest platformer either, but that's not really what it's trying to be. What it offers instead is something far more emotional, more atmospheric, more reflective, and more hard-hitting. This is cinematic storytelling at its strongest, and while it might not challenge you mechanically, it really doesn't need to, because this is a game built on feeling rather than friction, and it's one that stays with you long after the final credits roll. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.